Struggling single mom got into the millionaire CEO's car by mistake. Then her life changed forever. The rain fell in heavy sheets, turning the cracked sidewalks of West Glenview into shallow streams. Elise Carter tightened the hood of her threadbare jacket, her arms cradling 8-month-old Lila against her chest. The baby's forehead burned through the fabric, her small body racked with feverish shivers. Elise bounced gently on her heels under the narrow awning of a shuttered laundromat, trying to keep Lila calm. The doctor's clinic downtown only accepted walk-ins in the morning. If they missed this window, the next appointment would be 2 weeks away, and Lila's rasping cough made it clear she did not have that kind of time. Elise glanced at her phone, the screen barely visible through the raindrops. The Uber she had ordered was just 1 minute away. "Almost there, sweetheart," she murmured, kissing the top of Lila's damp curls. A black SUV pulled up beside the curb, license plate ending in 394, just like the app said. Without hesitation, Elise rushed forward and pulled open the rear door. "Thank you for stopping. My baby's very sick," she said breathlessly, sliding into the seat and adjusting Lila on her lap. Her diaper bag tumbled down at her feet with a muffled thud. The interior of the SUV was pristine leather seats, no crumbs, no empty coffee cups, no smell of fast food. It took her a moment to notice the man in the driver's seat, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit, hands frozen on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry. Who are you and why are you in my car?" he asked, voice calm but firm. Elise blinked, confusion dawning. "Wait, this isn't an Uber?" she asked, her voice catching. "No," the man replied, turning slightly to look at her through the rearview mirror. His eyes were strikingly pale blue, his expression unreadable. "My license plate ends in 931, not 394. Elise's heart sank. "Oh my God," she whispered, reaching for the door handle. "I am so sorry. I must have mixed up the cars. I'll get out right now." But before she could open the door, Lila let out a violent cough, her tiny body shaking against Elise's chest. Elise instinctively held her tighter, trying to soothe her with a soft hum, though panic prickled at the edge of her composure. The man in the front seat turned fully now, watching the child struggle through her breath. He exhaled slowly. "She's burning up," he said, more to himself than her. Then, after a moment's pause, "I'll drive you." Elise looked up, stunned. "You don't have to. I mean, you don't even know me." "I don't," he said, shifting into gear. "But that baby doesn't have time for you to wait in the rain for another car." "Where are you headed?" "El Centro Community Clinic," she said softly, still unsure whether this was some strange act of kindness or a terrible mistake. "Good," the man said simply. "That's not far." The SUV eased into traffic, windshield wipers working double time. Elise settled back into the seat, still holding Lila close, the baby's cough subsiding into wheezy breaths. She glanced at the man's face again. He looked vaguely familiar, like someone she had seen on the cover of a magazine or in the background of a news segment. "I'm Elise," she offered quietly, "and this is Lila." "Grant," the man replied, eyes on the road. Something clicked. Grant Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Group, a name she remembered from a headline about some massive housing development deal last year. She stared at the back of his head, too surprised to say anything else. When they stopped at a red light, Grant adjusted the heat higher. "She needs to stay warm," he said. "And you? You're soaked." Elise glanced down at her jeans, clinging to her legs. "Yeah. Kind of unavoidable when you live 5 blocks from the nearest covered bus stop." They reached the clinic just 15 minutes later. Grant pulled into the parking lot and shifted the car into park. "Good luck," he said, his voice still cool but not unkind. "I hope she gets better." Elise looked at him, the rain glistening on the window. "You really didn't have to help us. Thank you." He gave her a small nod. "Take care of her." As Elise stepped out into the drizzle, Lila now softly asleep against her shoulder, she had no idea that a wrong turn into the wrong car on a rainy morning would turn out to be the most important decision of her life. The rain beat steady against the windshield, a quiet rhythm to the silence inside the SUV. Elise sat tensely in the back seat, her arms wrapped around Lila, whose fevered head pressed weakly against her mother's chest. Grant glanced in the rearview mirror every so often, his hand steady on the wheel but his expression unreadable. "I'm really sorry again," Elise murmured. "I didn't mean to invade your car like that. I thought you were the Uber." Grant's voice was calm, low. "You mentioned your baby's sick." She nodded, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, Lila's 8 months. She's had this cough for days, but the fever started last night. I've been trying to get time off work, but both my shifts are short-staffed and—" She trailed off, sighing. "If we miss this appointment, they'll reschedule us for 2 weeks later." "You work 2 jobs?" he asked, glancing at her again. "Night cleaner at a law firm downtown and barista at a place near 16th and Pine." She shifted Lila gently, adjusting the blanket. "Rent's high, and daycare's not cheap, but it's just me, so—" Grant was quiet for a moment, then said, "Where's her father?" "He left before she was born," Elise said, keeping her tone even. "Said he wasn't ready to be a parent. He's been ready to disappear, though." Grant's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be," she replied, but her voice faltered. "It's not your problem." The silence returned, thickened by her words. But then Grant spoke again, softer this time. "My sister lost her baby when he was 10 months old. Respiratory infection. They lived in a rural area, and the nearest hospital didn't have a ventilator available. By the time they got to the city, it was too late." Elise looked up. The quiet weight in his voice caught her off guard. "I'm sorry," she said. "She never forgave herself," he continued, eyes on the road. "And I never forgave the system." They didn't speak for a few minutes. Lila stirred, her breathing labored. Elise rocked her gently, whispering comfort. Grant turned the heater up a notch, angling the vents toward the back. When they reached the clinic, a squat brick building with peeling paint and a faded sign, Grant pulled up close to the entrance. Elise moved quickly, gathering her diaper bag and sliding out, careful not to jostle Lila. "Thank you," she said, her eyes meeting his through the open door. "Really?" Grant gave a small nod. "I hope she gets better soon." Inside the clinic, the wait was mercifully short. The doctor examined Lila with practiced hands, then confirmed it was a respiratory infection. "She needs rest, fluids, and breathing treatments. I'll prescribe antibiotics and a nebulizer." Elise nodded, relieved until she reached the front desk and saw the total for the nebulizer rental. $60? She repeated, her voice cracking. "Is there any way I can pay it later?" The receptionist shook her head gently. "Clinic policy requires payment up front. I'm sorry." Elise stared at the number. Her bank account had less than $45. Her next paycheck wasn't for 4 days. Her throat tightened, eyes stinging. She turned away, cradling Lila closer, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mommy will figure something out." Behind her, the glass door opened. Grant stepped in, brushing rain from his coat. He didn't say a word. He walked to the desk, pulled out a sleek black card, and slid it toward the receptionist. "Cover the nebulizer and her medication," he said simply. "Sir, we—" "Do it," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. Elise turned, stunned. You don't have to—" "I know," Grant replied, meeting her eyes. "But I want to." She opened her mouth, then closed it, overwhelmed. Lila whimpered in her arms. "Thank you," she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "You don't even know us." Grant looked at Lila. "I know enough." The rain had stopped by the time Elise stepped out of the clinic, the sky still gray but quiet. Lila slept soundly in her arms, her tiny chest rising and falling in a more regular rhythm than before. Elise clutched the nebulizer bag and prescription paper with her free hand. She expected the SUV to be gone, but when she turned, Grant was still there, standing by the passenger side of his car. "Are you sure you don't want me to call another ride for you?" he asked. "I'll manage," Elise said gently. "You've already done too much." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small white business card. "Just in case." She hesitated, then took it. "Grant Whitmore," she read, eyes scanning the sleek gold print. Whitmore Holdings. Only when she said it aloud did the name register fully in her mind. She'd seen it on city billboards and construction signs, heard it in news clips about urban housing projects. She looked up at him, stunned. "You're that Whitmore?" He gave a small shrug, almost apologetic. Most days. Elise shook her head in disbelief. "Why didn't you say something?" "Would it have changed anything?" he asked. "You needed help. That's all I saw." The next morning, Elise sat on the worn couch in her apartment, Lila playing beside her with a soft cloth book. The nebulizer hummed quietly nearby. Elise held Grant's card in her hand, reading the name again and again, still unable to believe the man who'd driven her and paid for her daughter's treatment was one of the most powerful names in the city. Around noon, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered. "Mr. Carter?" a woman's voice said politely. "This is Vanessa, Mr. Whitmore's assistant. He asked if you might have time to speak with him today. He's at the clinic, said you might still be nearby." Elise blinked in surprise. "He's back at the clinic?" "Yes. He said there's something he'd like to ask you about a new project he's working on." Curious and slightly anxious, Elise dressed Lila, packed the diaper bag, and walked the 6 blocks back to the clinic. When she arrived, Grant was standing near the check-in counter, talking with one of the nurses. He turned when he saw her, offering a soft smile. "You came. I was curious," Elise said, and a little confused. Grant gestured toward a small waiting area. "Can we sit for a minute?" She followed, settling into the cracked vinyl chair while Lila dozed in her sling. Grant leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I wasn't planning to come back here today," he began. "But last night, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. About you." "Me?" Elise asked, genuinely surprised. "I run a charitable foundation alongside Whitmore Holdings. We've been developing a new program focused on family housing and healthcare support, especially for single parents. But it's always been designed from the top down. What we need is perspective from someone who's living it." Elise stared at him. "You mean me?" "Yes," he said. "We're hosting a focus group next week. Real stories, real needs. I'd like you to be part of it. It's just a conversation. We provide dinner, childcare, and a stipend." She blinked, processing his words. "Why me? I'm no expert. I'm just trying to survive." "That's exactly why," Grant said quietly. "Because you know what it's like to need help. And because you've survived, you know what kind of help actually makes a difference." Elise looked down at Lila, whose cheeks were no longer burning with fever. "What kind of stipend?" she asked cautiously. $250 for the session," Grant replied. 2 hours, and if you can't get the evening off, we'll pay to cover your shift." Elise hesitated, biting her lip. "You don't even know me." Grant gave her a level look. "I know you were willing to walk through the rain with a sick child. That tells me a lot." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elise nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it." Grant smiled for the first time since she'd met him. "Good. I think you'll help us more than you realize." The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the glass-paneled hallway of Whitmore Holdings. Elise stepped out, smoothing the wrinkles in her second-hand blouse. She held Lila's diaper bag close, though today the baby was with a neighbor. She followed her into the lobby, and for the first time in what felt like years, Elise was walking into something that wasn't about survival. It was about being heard. Vanessa greeted her warmly and led her to a conference room where 4 other women were already seated, chatting nervously. At the head of the table was Grant, reviewing some notes. He looked up as Elise entered, his expression softening. "Glad you could make it," he said. Elise offered a small smile and took a seat near the end of the table. Bottled water, pens, and notepads had been neatly arranged for everyone. A small sign read, "Community Wellness and Housing Initiative Focus Group." As Grant began speaking, explaining the project's goals, and inviting each participant to share their stories, Elise found herself listening closely. One woman spoke about juggling night shifts with no child care. Another talked about the fear of eviction. When it was Elise's turn, she kept it brief, raising Lila alone, working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet. Grant nodded thoughtfully, taking notes. "We want to create solutions that actually work, not just sound good on paper," he said. "And that starts with listening." After the session, Grant invited Elise to stay for a quick debrief. As the others filtered out, she lingered near the window, watching the late afternoon sun stretch shadows across the skyline. Grant poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. "You were quiet at first," he said, "but what you shared about struggling with rent, working back-to-back shifts, it was honest. It matters." Elise smiled faintly. "Most days I don't even know what matters anymore." He studied her for a moment. "You've got strength. Not everyone in your position would show up here, let alone speak up." Before Elise could respond, a knock sounded on the glass. Vanessa stepped in. "Grant, Blake just arrived for the board finance review. He's waiting in the East Room." Grant nodded. "Thanks. I'll be there in 5. The name hit Elise like a wave of ice. Blake. She turned sharply, blood draining from her face. "Blake Morrison?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Grant looked at her, confused. "Yeah, our CFO. Why?" Elise's hands tightened around her cup. She stared into the coffee like it held answers. I didn't know he worked here." Grant's brow furrowed. "Is everything okay?" "No," Elise said, her voice strained. "He's Lila's father." Grant blinked, stunned into silence. "I met him when I was finishing my childcare certification," she continued. "We were together for almost 3 years. When I found out I was pregnant, he told me I was on my own, said it wasn't his problem and that I should figure it out. He moved apartments, changed numbers, blocked everything." Grant stood there, quiet, processing. "You're sure it's him?" Elise nodded, her voice shaky. "I never told anyone. What was the point? He made it clear what I meant to him." Grant turned away for a moment, gripping the edge of the table. "That's a lot to take in." "I'm not here to start anything," Elise said quickly. "You've done more for me in 2 days than he ever did. I didn't even know he worked for you. I thought you should know." Grant looked at her again, his eyes steady. "Thank you for telling me." He paused, then added, "You didn't deserve that. Neither did Lila." Elise exhaled, some of the weight loosening in her chest. It felt strange, sharing this secret, but maybe, just maybe, she had finally told the right person. The following week brought rain again, soft and constant, as if the sky itself was waiting. Elise sat in her living room, the gray light slanting across the floorboards. Lila asleep against her chest, warm and gently breathing. The storm outside mirrored the weight she'd carried for nearly a year, one that had settled deep, quiet, but never truly gone. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Grant. "Can you come to Whitmore HQ at 10 tomorrow? There's something you should be part of." Elise stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered. Part of her wanted to say no, to stay in this quiet bubble with her baby and forget about the man who'd once made her feel like nothing more than an afterthought. But the way Grant had phrased it, "you should be part of," landed differently. It didn't sound like obligation. It sounded like trust, like she mattered. At 10 a.m. sharp, she stood in the polished marble lobby of Whitmore Holdings, heart pounding under her coat. The ceilings soared above her, glass and steel reflecting her nervous silhouette. She held her chin high anyway. Vanessa, Grant's assistant, greeted her with a soft smile and led her to a private viewing room adjacent to the main conference room. "They're just beginning," she said, opening a door to a space lined with smoked glass. The lights dimmed slightly, giving Elise a clear view of the boardroom beyond. Inside, Blake Morrison sat at the long table, scrolling through a tablet, sipping from a Whitmore-branded coffee cup, unaware he was being watched. Several board members murmured in low voices. Daniel from legal sat with a thick folder of documents, and at the front Grant stood tall, composed in his navy suit. Elise sat slowly, hands folded in her lap. She hadn't seen Blake in nearly 2 years, not since she told him she was pregnant. Not since he'd told her, without flinching, that it was not his problem. Her stomach turned. Grant opened the meeting with calm authority. He began presenting a timeline of financial anomalies, projects that had stalled, initiatives that vanished without record, housing developments, family outreach programs, health partnerships in underserved areas. Elise's fingers tightened around each other. The screen lit up with images, budgets once earmarked for the exact building she'd lived in. She remembered it all too well. The weeks the water ran brown, the sound of rats in the walls, the space heater she used during Lila's first winter because the central heat had failed. Blake leaned back, a smug smirk just visible on his face. With respect, Grant, budgeting for these projects is fluid. We reallocate funds when necessary. Grant clicked to another slide. His voice remained even. Funds were reallocated into a private account in the Caymans, registered under your brother's name. Shell companies connected to construction bids we never received. That's not budgeting, that's theft. Silence fell. Blake's jaw ticked slightly. That's a serious accusation. Grant didn't blink. And I have serious proof. Then he looked toward the tinted glass. Elise felt her pulse spike. She wasn't ready, but maybe she didn't need to be. Maybe bravery wasn't about feeling ready. Maybe it was just choosing to walk in anyway. There's one more perspective this board needs to hear, Grant said, his voice quieting. Someone directly affected by Blake's choices. He nodded at Vanessa. The door opened, Elise stepped in, the room went still. Her heels clicked softly against the tile as she walked forward. She wore the same navy blouse she'd worn to her interview at the daycare, modest, pressed, and suddenly too tight over her racing heart. She didn't look at Blake, not at first. She looked at Grant, who met her eyes and gave a nod, steady, silent, grounding. She took a breath. "Elise Carter," she said, voice steady. "Single mother. Former tenant of the Grand Elm Apartments before the ceilings began to cave and the mold spread faster than I could scrub it." Now she turned to Blake. He froze. "You were in charge of the funds for that property," she continued. "You knew what was happening. You knew I lived there. You knew I was pregnant." "Elise, this isn't the place," Blake started, voice shaking. "No," she interrupted. "This is exactly the place. You disappeared. You blocked my number, sent me a cease and desist. You left me with silence and a child you never once asked about." A long pause. Blake's face had gone chalk white. Grant stepped in beside her. "Elise has provided a full statement, and we've confirmed the timeline with our records. Lila's name is listed in multiple documents Blake had access to. He knew, and he chose theft over accountability." Blake stood suddenly, scraping the chair. "I want a lawyer." "You'll need one," Daniel from legal said calmly. "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Security is waiting outside." Blake stared around the room, as if searching for a single ally. There were none. Not even Grant looked away as he collected his things and left without a word. As the door clicked shut, Elise's breath shook once, then settled. The rain outside had slowed. "Thank you," Grant said, turning to her. She shook her head, voice quiet. "I didn't come for revenge, I know." She replied, "You came so someone else wouldn't have to." The weeks that followed moved with surprising momentum. With Blake officially removed and legal charges filed, Grant wasted no time redirecting his energy. His mission was clear: restore what had been broken, not just reputationally, but tangibly, physically, and humanely. The first target: reviving the long-abandoned community housing project near Elise's old apartment complex. "I want to finish what should have been done right," Grant told her one afternoon, the two of them sitting across from each other in his office. The windows framed a skyline in motion, clouds passing, people walking, change unfolding. Plans were already being redrawn, budgets reapproved, emails flying. But this time, we'll do more than just build homes. We'll build possibility, safety, roots. Elise nodded slowly, Lila cradled against her chest, one hand curled protectively around the baby's bottle. Words escaped her, How could she begin to articulate what it meant to witness the world shifting around her and because of her? Gratitude felt too small, too tidy. Also, Grant added, almost as if it were an afterthought, though Elise knew him well enough now to recognize when he was being deliberate, "We'll be opening a child care center on the first floor of the complex." Elise looked up, surprised, but smiling. "That'll be a blessing for the parents there. So many can't afford anything close to reliable care." Grant nodded, then leaned forward slightly. "And I want you to run it." She blinked. "Wait? Me?" "You studied early childhood education. You worked with kids for years before Lila, and I've seen the way you speak to people, staff, strangers, me. You know how to lead with empathy and clarity." Elise opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. Her heart was thudding in a way that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't confidence either. "I haven't worked since Lila was born," she murmured. "And even before that, I wasn't in charge. I was just an assistant teacher. I've never led a team, never built a program from scratch. I don't have the credentials for this, Grant." Grant's voice dropped in tone, not firm but resolute. "You have more than credentials. You have experience. You've lived what many of those parents are living right now. You've walked through the fire and come out carrying someone else in your arms. I don't want a resume, I want heart. I want someone who knows what dignity looks like when it's all you've got." Her throat tightened and she looked away, blinking fast. "I just don't want to fail." "You won't," he said gently, firmly, "because this isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, and you've been doing that since the day I met you." She shook her head slightly, a tear slipping free. "You keep giving me more than I know what to do with." Grant stood, walked around the desk, and lowered himself beside her. Carefully, without pressure, he reached for her hand. "I'm not giving," he said. "I'm choosing. I'm choosing you, because you know what it means to keep going when there's no map, and because you see people not for their mess, but for their worth." Something in her broke, then reformed. That moment wasn't about charity. It was about belief. And for the first time in a very long time, Elise believed in herself, too. 3 months later, Elise unlocked the door to her new apartment, her and Lila's apartment. Light poured in through tall windows, warming the hardwood floor. The paint was fresh, the walls bare but waiting. In the kitchen, a vase of wildflowers sat on the counter, a quiet welcome from someone who knew this moment mattered more than words could. Lila cooed in Elise's arms, eyes wide as if she too could feel the difference. It was not just a change of address, it was a beginning. Downstairs, the community child care center was nearly complete. Elise's name was already on the door. Elise Carter, director. The first time she saw it, she had stood frozen, keys trembling in her hand. Not long ago, she had sat in waiting rooms, her dignity threadbare. Now, she would be the one welcoming others in from the storm. The center would open in a week. Staff had been trained, toys arranged, schedules printed, but before the doors opened, Elise hung a small wooden plaque beside the main entrance. In clean, simple letters, it read, "This place exists because someone believed we could still bloom." That someone, of course, was Grant. He had become a regular presence in their lives, not in grand gestures, but in steady, quiet ways. He brought groceries when Elise worked late. He built a small bookshelf for Lila's toys. And every Sunday they cooked together in Elise's kitchen, laughter filling the air like the smell of cinnamon and hope. One evening, just as dusk began to soften the windows, Lila stood holding onto the couch, her chubby legs wobbling with effort. "She's thinking about it," Elise whispered. Grant knelt nearby, hands out. "Come on, little one." Elise reached out too. "We're right here." And then it happened. Lila took one step, then another. 2 tiny hands reached, one to Elise, one to Grant. Connected, steady. A family not by name, but by choice. As Lila tumbled into their arms, giggling with triumph, Elise looked at Grant. Their foreheads nearly touched as they held the baby between them. No promises were spoken, no declarations needed, but in that moment, surrounded by life and laughter, Elise realized she was no longer waiting for life to begin. It already had. 2 months had passed since Elise and Lila moved into their new home in West Hill, a modest apartment tucked on the 3rd floor of a complex built for single-parent families. The balcony overlooked a small park, where laughter from children playing drifted up like wind chimes in spring. Grant once described the project as just a financial report. Now it echoed with life-chalk drawings on the sidewalks, laundry flapping on shared lines, and the scent of banana bread warming the hallway. Elise had stepped fully into her new role as director of the child care center, located on the ground floor. On her first official day, she read a story to a circle of curious, squirming toddlers. Leela, sitting with the group, leaned into a boy her age and giggled. Elise felt her throat tighten, not from sadness, but from a sudden and quiet sense of home. Grant had become a familiar presence. Most mornings he stopped by with coffee, always black for him, always vanilla for her. He fixed the fridge when it rattled. He stayed late to assemble new shelves for the center. And sometimes, without saying much at all, he sat on the floor beside Elise and Lila, reading picture books or helping fold laundry like he had always been there. Elise no longer counted the days until payday. The money was still tight, but it stretched now because it wasn't weighed down by panic. Life was still simple, but it was no longer fragile. One evening after a quiet dinner, Grant knocked softly and stepped into the apartment holding a small paper bag. "Something for Lila," he said. Inside was a handmade pillow-soft linen, stitched in delicate loops of sea-green thread. On it were 3 words: Lila, loved, home. Elise stared at it, her hand brushing the embroidery. Tears welled, quiet and uninvited. "You embroidered this?" she asked, voice low. Grant nodded, a faint, sheepish smile forming. "She told me she's never had a pillow of her own. I figured it was time." She looked up, then reached for his hand, not a thank you, not a question, just held it, long and firm. It said everything she didn't have to. When Lila had drifted off to sleep that night, her little fingers curled around the corner of her new pillow, Grant sat quietly on the edge of the couch. Elise returned from the kitchen, a mug in hand, and he looked up. "I was thinking," he said carefully, "next month is Lila's birthday. Maybe the 3 of us could celebrate. Together, like a family." She met his gaze. This time, there was no fear behind her eyes. "I think she's already chosen." "And so have I." The final scene was quiet, tender. They sat on the living room rug, folding paper cranes, Lila giggling each time one flopped sideways. Sunlight from the early spring morning poured in through the window, warming the room like a blanket. On the coffee table sat a new photo frame, Elise, Grant, and Lila, standing beneath the banner of the newly opened child care center. Behind them, the sun glowed. Later, a neighbor visiting the apartment noticed the stitched pillow on Lila's bed. "Where'd you get this?" she asked, curious. Grant smiled. "Didn't get it anywhere. I made it." He ran a hand gently across the embroidery and added, almost to himself, "Some things, if you want them to exist in the world, you have to stitch them with your own hands." If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more true-to-life tales of quiet resilience, unexpected grace, and the power of being seen. Because sometimes, the smallest gestures like a pillow stitched with love can hold the greatest meaning. Click that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us weekly for stories that remind us family is not always who you're born to, it's who you choose, and who chooses you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next soul-stirring story.